The massive space station rotated slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. Its metal corridors filled with an unusual tension. Word had spread quickly through every dormitory, every classroom, every gathering space where students met to share gossip and study notes. A human was coming to Galactic Academy. Not just any human, but one of the legendary Deathworlders, beings from a planet so hostile that their very existence defied galactic understanding. For most species in the galaxy, Earth was spoken of in whispers, a nightmare world where survival required adaptations that bordered on the impossible. The transport shuttle docked with a soft hiss, and Kong Minho stepped onto the station for the first time. His academy uniform felt strange against his skin, designed for beings who had never known the crushing weight of full gravity or the burn of unfiltered sunlight. The air here was thinner than what his lungs expected, but they adjusted automatically, a simple biological response that would have sent his new classmates running in terror if they had witnessed it. Minho walked through the main corridor, his footsteps echoing differently than those of the other students. Where they seemed to float or glide, his movements carried the weight of a world that had forged every bone and muscle through millions of years of constant danger. He tried to walk softly, tried to make himself seem less imposing, but even his careful movements drew stares. Clusters of alien students pressed against the walls as he passed, their conversations dropping to urgent whispers. Zyla, whose body was made of living crystal that caught and scattered light into beautiful rainbow patterns, held her datapad so tightly that small stress fractures appeared along her fingers. Her people, the Vithrak, were known for their delicate beauty and their fragility. A single strong vibration could shatter their crystalline bones. She leaned toward her study group, her voice barely audible. I read the reports from the Galactic Council. Humans evolved on a world where everything was designed to kill them. The weather, the animals, even the plants were poisonous. Beside her, Korth swayed on his root-like feet, his bar-covered skin shifting from its normal green to a sickly yellow color that indicated deep anxiety. As a Floranian, he was one of the more durable species at the Academy, able to regrow lost limbs and survive in harsh conditions. But even his people were considered fragile compared to the stories they heard about Deathworlders. His branch-like arms trembled as he spoke. The biology professor showed us scans of human bone density. It's 4 times thicker than ours. Their muscles are wrapped around metal-hard skeletons, and they have backup organs. If one heart fails, they keep functioning. They're like living weapons. Minho caught fragments of their conversation as he passed, and his heart sank a little more with each fearful word. He had known this would be difficult, but the reality was worse than he had imagined. Back on Earth, he was considered gentle, perhaps even weak by human standards. He preferred books to sports, chose negotiation over conflict, and had never hurt another living being in his life. Yet here, his very existence was seen as a threat. A group of Aquarian students scattered as he approached, their webbed feet slapping against the floor as they hurried away. They moved like schools of fish, avoiding a predator, and Minho realized, with growing sadness, that he was the predator in their eyes. These beings, with their large eyes adapted for underwater living and their delicate gill slits, looked at him and saw death incarnate. Even the Corvan students, who were among the largest and strongest species at the Academy, watched him with wary respect. Their naturally armored skin and warrior culture made them formidable by galactic standards, yet they knew that humans had evolved beyond the need for natural armor. They had survived their death world through speed, intelligence, and adaptability, traits that made them far more dangerous than simple physical strength. Minho finally found his dormitory assignment and pressed his palm against the scanner. The door slid open to reveal a room designed for his human physiology, reinforced furniture that could support his dense bone structure, ENHANCED, air filtration to handle his different respiratory needs, and gravity settings that could be adjusted to Earth normal if he needed the comfort of home. As he set down his few belongings, Minho stared out the viewport at the stars beyond. They looked the same as they did from Earth, but everything else felt alien and unwelcoming. He had come here with dreams of building bridges between species, of showing the galaxy that humans could be more than just warriors from a hostile world. But as he listened to the frightened whispers echoing through the corridors, as he remembered the way students had pressed themselves against walls to avoid being near him, Minho wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Perhaps Deathworlders and the rest of the galaxy were simply too different to coexist peacefully. Yet, somewhere deep inside him, the same stubborn determination that had carried his ancestors through ice ages and natural disasters began to stir. He had not come this far to give up at the first sign of difficulty. If his classmates saw him as a monster, then he would prove them wrong. He would show them that even Deathworlders could choose compassion over violence, understanding over fear. The real challenge, he realized, would not be surviving in this gentle environment. It would be teaching others that survival could be achieved through more than just strength. 3 days had passed since Minho first walked through the corridors of Galactic Academy, and he had begun to find his rhythm in most classes. Mathematics was the same whether you learned it on Earth or in the depths of space. Literature required only translation software to bridge the gap between species. Even advanced physics seemed to follow universal rules that his human brain could grasp as easily as any other student's. But today was different. Today brought the class that every student at the academy both anticipated and dreaded in equal measure. Mandatory physical education. Minho stood outside the gymnasium, reading the message on his personal communicator for the 3rd time. Coach Velkin wanted to see him privately before class began. The coach's request was polite, even respectful, but Minho could sense the underlying concern that prompted it. The coach's office was larger than most spaces on the station, designed to accommodate his impressive Corvan physiology. Coach Velkin rose from behind his desk as Minho entered, and the human was struck once again by the contradiction the coach represented. The Corvan species were known throughout the galaxy as natural warriors, their thick-plated skin serving as armor and their powerful builds making them formidable in combat. Yet this particular Corvan moved with surprising gentleness, his massive hands careful not to damage the delicate furniture around him. "Please, sit," Coach Velkin rumbled, his voice carrying the deep resonance typical of his people. His skin plates, normally a confident blue-green, showed touches of concerned yellow around the edges. "I wanted to speak with you before today's activities begin." Minho settled into the reinforced chair provided for his use, noting how even the furniture here had to be specially designed to handle the bone density and muscle mass of a Deathworlder. The coach leaned forward, his large eyes reflecting genuine worry. "Student Minho, I must be direct with you. Our gymnasium equipment was designed for beings whose evolution took place under much more forgiving conditions than your homeworld provided." The coach's words were chosen carefully, diplomatically. "I need you to understand that what seems like gentle movement to you might be devastating to your classmates." The human nodded slowly, appreciating the coach's straightforward approach. "I understand, Coach. I've been practicing restraint since I arrived at the academy. I know how easily I could hurt someone without meaning to." Through the transparent walls of the office, Minho could see other students beginning to gather in the main gymnasium. The sight made his stomach clench with nervous energy. He recognized most of them from his other classes, though few had spoken directly to him yet. Liuna fluttered near the entrance, her delicate wings catching the artificial sunlight that streamed through the gymnasium's transparent ceiling. Her people, the Lepidans, were among the most graceful species in the galaxy, their moth-like appearance hiding sophisticated intelligence and artistic sensibilities. But those same qualities that made them beautiful also made them incredibly fragile. Minho had read that a Lepidion's wing membrane was thinner than paper and just as easily torn. Park Jae-won had already claimed a position near one of the emergency exits, his small form barely visible among the taller students. Webbed fingers kept checking and rechecking his personal safety beacon, a device that would summon immediate medical assistance if his vital signs showed distress. His people had evolved in peaceful underwater cities where the greatest physical challenge was swimming against mild currents. Even Kim Sora, whose Florenian heritage made her one of the more durable students present, showed signs of nervousness. Her bark-like skin had shifted to the mottled brown color that indicated anxiety, and her branch-like limbs swayed in the unconscious rhythm her people used to calm themselves. The Florenians were known for their ability to regrow lost body parts and survive in harsh conditions. Yet even they paled in comparison to Deathworld adaptations. Coach Velkin continued his briefing, pulling up holographic displays that showed the day's planned activities. We'll begin with basic coordination exercises, simple movements designed to help different species understand their own physical capabilities. Nothing strenuous, nothing competitive. But as he spoke, both the coach and student could see the gathering crowd through the office walls. More students were arriving, and with each new face, the nervous energy in the gymnasium grew more palpable. Conversations were happening in hushed tones, with frequent glances toward the coach's office, where the Deathworlder waited. "I've designed today's session specifically with your presence in mind," the coach admitted. "Lower intensity activities, additional safety protocols, and emergency medical staff on standby." He paused, his expression showing the weight of responsibility he felt. "I need you to promise me that you'll stop immediately if I give any signal. Your safety is important, but the safety of every student in that room is my primary concern." Minho felt the familiar weight of being different, of being seen as a potential threat rather than simply another student trying to learn and grow. But he also understood the coach's position. In his research about other species, he had learned just how delicate most galactic life forms truly were. What seemed like a gentle tap to a human could break bones in a Vithrak. A friendly pat on the back could puncture the breathing sacs of an Aquarian. "I promise, Coach, I'll follow your lead completely." The two beings sat in silence for a moment, watching through the transparent walls as more students gathered. When Minho finally entered the gymnasium, the effect was immediate and unmistakable. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Students who had been laughing and joking suddenly found urgent reasons to examine their shoes or check their equipment. A clear space formed around him automatically, as if his presence generated some invisible force field that pushed others away. He took his assigned position in the exercise formation, moving as slowly and carefully as possible, but every eye in the room remained fixed on him. Coach Velkin's voice boomed across the gymnasium, perhaps louder than strictly necessary. "Today we begin with basic coordination exercises, designed to be suitable for all species represented here. Remember, physical education is about personal improvement and understanding your own capabilities, not about competition with others." But, despite the coach's reassuring words, Minho could feel the tension radiating from every corner of the room. His classmates were waiting, watching, wondering when the Deathworlder's legendary control might finally slip and reveal the monster they believed lurked beneath his careful exterior. The warm-up session had passed without incident, much to everyone's relief. Minho moved through the gentle stretching exercises with careful precision, his human flexibility allowing him to mirror the movements designed for multiple species. His muscles responded easily to the light demands, though he could feel how much strength he was holding back with every motion. The tension in the gymnasium remained thick enough to cut with a knife. Every student kept one eye on their own exercises, and another on the Deathworlder in their midst. Their movements were more cautious than usual, as if they feared that even their own natural actions might somehow trigger a dangerous response from the human dot. Coach Velkin observed from the center of the room, his trained eye noting how restrained movements still carried more power than most species could generate at full effort. The coach's skin plates showed subtle shifts in color, professional concern mixed with genuine curiosity. about how this unprecedented situation would unfold. "Excellent work, everyone," the coach announced, his voice carrying across the spacious gymnasium. "Now we'll move to basic locomotion exercises. These are designed to help you understand and practice your species' natural movement patterns. Nothing strenuous, simply demonstrate the way your people naturally move through space." Around the gymnasium, students began to spread out into designated areas marked for different types of movement. The variety was beautiful to watch, a showcase of the galaxy's incredible diversity of evolutionary solutions to the problem of getting from one place to another. Li Yuna took to the air with the natural grace of her people, her delicate wings carrying her in smooth, hovering flights around floating markers. The Lepidans had evolved for aerial precision, and she moved through three-dimensional space with the ease of a dancer, her compound eyes tracking multiple reference points simultaneously. Park Jawan demonstrated the quick, darting movements, typical of a his webbed feet provided perfect traction on the padded gymnasium floor as he zipped between ground-level markers, changing direction with sudden bursts of speed that mimicked the way his people moved through water currents. Kim Sora and the other Florenian students began their characteristic swaying motions, moving through space with the fluid grace of wind-blown trees. Their movements appeared almost like a dance, each gesture flowing naturally into the next as they navigated their designated area with organic precision. Other species showed their own unique adaptations. The crystalline Vithrak students moved with careful, measured steps that prevented stress fractures in their delicate bodies, while the armored Corvin students demonstrated the steady, powerful movements of natural warriors. When it came time for Minho to demonstrate human locomotion, he approached the exercise area with extreme caution. The marker had been set at what the Academy's computers calculated as an appropriate height for human jumping ability, barely 1 meter high. Well within what should have been comfortable range for his species, he studied the marker carefully, trying to calculate exactly how much force he would need to clear it safely. In his mind, he ran through the physics of the jump, accounting for the station's artificial gravity, the padding of the gymnasium floor, and his own body mass. He bent his knees carefully, positioning himself for what he intended to be the gentlest possible leap. The problem was that Minho's understanding of gentle had been calibrated by Earth standards. He pushed off from the floor with what felt like the lightest possible touch, barely flexing the muscles in his legs. To his human senses, he was using almost no power at all. The result was catastrophic. Minho rocketed upward like a missile, his trajectory carrying him nearly 3 meters into the air, triple the height of the intended marker. His flight path took him far beyond the designated landing zone, and he sailed over the heads of several terrified students before gravity finally reclaimed him. The sound of his landing echoed through the gymnasium like thunder, even though he tried to touch down softly. His dense bone structure and the physics of his fall created a resounding impact that seemed to shake the entire room. The specially reinforced padding compressed under the force, creating a visible crater where he landed. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Students scattered in all directions like a flock of startled birds, their various species-specific panic responses creating chaos throughout the gymnasium. Yuna's wings beat frantically as she pressed herself against the far wall, her compound eyes wide with terror. "He's lost control," she chittered in her native Lepidanian language, her voice high and thin with fear. Coach Velkin stepped forward, his hands raised in a calming gesture, but the damage to the room's atmosphere was already done. The careful peace of the exercise session had been shattered by the demonstration of just how different Deathworld physics truly were. But the worst was yet to come. The next planned activity was a simple trust-building exercise, basic handshakes between paired students, designed to help different species become comfortable with gentle physical contact across biological boundaries. When Jaewon nervously approached, his webbed hand extended in the traditional gesture of greeting. Minho was determined to redeem himself. He would show everyone that he could control his strength, that the jumping incident had been a simple miscalculation. He grasped the small Aaron's hand with what he considered the most delicate touch possible, barely any pressure at all. Just enough contact to complete the handshake. Protocol. The result was horrifying. Jaewon's feet left the ground entirely as Minho's gentle grip lifted the small being like a piece of lightweight equipment. The Aquarian's panicked squeaks filled the air, his webbed limbs flailing helplessly as he found himself suspended in midair by what the human had intended as the softest possible handshake. Minho immediately released his grip and helped Jae back to the ground, but the psychological damage was complete. Around the gymnasium, students pressed themselves against walls and activated personal safety devices, convinced they had just witnessed the moment when the Deathworlder's control finally slipped everyone to the designated safety zones. Coach Velkin's voice cut through the rising panic, though Minho could see that the coach was more worried about mass hysteria than any actual physical threat, as his classmates huddled in the padded safe areas along the gymnasium walls. Minho stood alone in the center of the vast space, isolated by an invisible barrier of fear and misunderstanding. The weight of his Deathworld heritage pressed down on him more heavily than Earth's crushing gravity ever had, and he wondered if he would ever find a way to bridge the gap between his people and the rest of the galaxy. The hours after the gymnasium disaster stretched endlessly for Minho as he sat in his dormitory room, watching the stars turn slowly beyond the station's massive viewports. The artificial day cycle had shifted to evening mode, bathing his quarters in the soft amber light designed to help students from various worlds maintain healthy sleep patterns. His personal communicator lay on the desk beside him, its screen showing a growing list of unread messages. 17 new communications from Earth, messages from his parents asking how his studies were progressing, notes from former classmates wanting to hear about life among the stars, and excited queries from his younger sister about whether he had made friends with any aliens yet. How could he possibly explain that he was failing at the most basic level of social interaction? That his very presence seemed to inspire terror in beings he genuinely wanted to understand and befriend. The weight of disappointment sat heavy in his chest as he contemplated the growing gap between the dreams that had brought him to Galactic Academy and the harsh reality of life as the only Deathworlder among thousands of fragile alien students. A soft chime from his door interrupted his brooding. The sound was gentle, almost hesitant, unlike the confident tones that announced official academy business or emergency communications. Minho approached the door cautiously, wondering if perhaps Coach Velkin had come to discuss removing him from physical education classes entirely. When the door slid open, he found himself face to face with Lee Yuna, hovering nervously in the corridor just beyond his threshold. Her delicate wings trembled slightly in the recycled air, and her large compound eyes reflected the hallway's lighting in prismatic patterns that shifted like kaleidoscope fragments. "May I?" she began, her voice barely rising above a whisper. "May I come in?" The request caught Minho completely off guard. In the 3 days since his arrival, none of his fellow students had voluntarily approached him for anything beyond the most necessary academic interactions. He stepped aside carefully, moving with exaggerated slowness to telegraph his intentions and avoid any sudden motions that might startle her. Yuna fluttered into his room with the grace typical of her people, her wings carrying her in a smooth gliding motion that brought her to rest on the edge of his reinforced desk chair. She perched there delicately, her lightweight frame barely making an impression on the furniture designed to support his much denser human physiology. "I've been researching," she began, her antennae twitching in what Minho had learned from his xenobiology classes was a sign of curiosity rather than fear, about your homeworld, about your people and the conditions that shaped your evolution. She activated a small holographic projector from her personal equipment, and suddenly the space between them filled with images that made Minho's heart ache with homesickness. Earth hung in the artificial display like a blue and white jewel, but the images quickly zoomed in to show the planet's more violent aspects. Massive hurricanes swirled across vast oceans, their spiral arms carrying winds that could level entire cities. Volcanic eruptions painted the night sky with fountains of molten rock, creating new land masses while destroying others. The hologram showed dense forests, where massive predators stalked through the undergrowth, creatures that hunted not for survival but seemingly for the pleasure of the chase. "Your world tried to kill you," Yuna said, and her voice carried a note of wonder that Minho had never heard before. "Every single day, for millions of years. Gravity that would crush most galactic species, weather patterns that could destroy our cities, geological activity that reshapes continents and creatures that evolved specifically to hunt and kill other living things." Minho nodded slowly, seeing his homeworld through alien eyes for perhaps the first time. "It wasn't easy, but somehow we adapted to it all." "That's exactly what I don't understand," Yuna continued, leaning forward with growing excitement that made her wings shimmer with reflected light. "How did your species possibly survive long enough to develop intelligence? How did you overcome challenges that would have eliminated any other known form of life?" For the first time since arriving at Galactic Academy, Minho felt his face break into a genuine smile. The question showed real curiosity rather than fear, intellectual interest rather than suspicion. "Would you like me to show you?" Over the next hour, he opened his personal equipment kit and began demonstrating the precise control that humans took completely for granted. He threaded needles with hands that could punch through metal plating, his fingers moving with steady precision, despite possessing the strength to crush solid stone. He assembled delicate electronic components, using the same appendages that had accidentally lifted Jaewon off the ground during their disastrous handshake. When Yuna mentioned that her wing care equipment had been damaged in a recent accident, Minho asked to examine it. The device was incredibly intricate, designed to maintain the delicate membrane structure that allowed Lepidans to fly. Its repair would normally require specialized tools, available only in the Academy's technical workshops, but Minho's human hands evolved through millions of years of tool use and precise manipulation, treated the tiny components like child's toys. He adjusted microscopic calibration settings, realigned sensor arrays smaller than grains of sand, and restored the device to perfect working condition, using nothing but his natural dexterity. "This is what you don't understand about humans," Minho explained, as he completed the repair work that would have been impossible for any other species without technological assistance. "We didn't survive Earth by being the strongest or the fastest creatures on our world. We survived by learning perfect control over our own capabilities." Yuna's wings began to shimmer with colors that Minho recognized as amazement and excitement. "You're not dangerous because you can't control your strength," she said, her voice filled with sudden understanding. "You're incredible because you can control it so precisely that you can choose exactly how much force to use for any situation." The revelation hung in the air between them like a bridge spanning the gap between their species. For the first time, Minho saw himself reflected in alien eyes, not as a barely contained weapon, but as a being capable of extraordinary precision and restraint. That night, after Yuna had returned to her own dormitory, word began to spread through the Academy's residential sections. It traveled in excited whispers through corridors designed for a dozen different atmospheric requirements, carried in conversations conducted in languages that had evolved on worlds scattered across the galaxy. The Deathworlder, they learned, was not a creature of uncontrolled violence. He was something far more remarkable, a being whose terrifying physical capabilities were matched by an even more impressive ability to modulate those capabilities with artistic precision. The same evolution that had created his deadly potential had also created the control necessary to use that potential constructively rather than destructively. The emergency alarms cut through the peaceful atmosphere of study, period like a knife. Through silk, their urgent wailing echoing through every corridor of Galactic Academy. Minho looked up from his xenobiology textbook, where he had been reading about the respiratory systems of aquatic species, trying to better understand beings like Jaewon. The station's automated announcement system activated, broadcasting the crisis information in dozens of languages to accommodate every species aboard. Attention all students and faculty. Solar storm activity has caused complete artificial gravity failure in Section 7. All personnel are to remain in designated safe zones until emergency repairs are complete. But as Minho moved to his dormitory's reinforced viewport to look out at the affected area, he could see that the situation was far more serious than the calm announcement suggested. Section 7 housed the Academy's most popular observation deck, a massive, transparent chamber where students often gathered to study, while enjoying panoramic views of the surrounding starfield. Now that same chamber had become a nightmare of floating debris. Tables, chairs, personal equipment, and chunks of damaged wall panels tumbled through the zero-gravity environment in chaotic, unpredictable patterns. The beautiful observation deck had transformed into a three-dimensional maze of spinning obstacles that moved with deadly momentum, entrapped in the center of this chaos. Visible through the transparent aluminum barriers that separated the observation deck from the rest of the station were four figures that Minho recognized with growing horror. Jaewon clung desperately to what remained of a study table, his small, aquarian body looking even more fragile as he tried to avoid the larger pieces of debris spinning around him. Sora had managed to grab hold of a wall-mounted display panel, but her Florenian physiology was already showing signs of stress from the cold and low oxygen conditions created by the emergency. Two other students, a Vithrak, whose crystalline body caught the emergency lighting in fractured rainbows, and a young Corvin, who looked barely old enough to be at the academy, were trapped near the chamber's far wall, dodging debris that moved with enough force to seriously injure or kill them. Through his viewport, Minho could see the rescue teams mobilizing in the corridors below. Emergency personnel from multiple species worked frantically to organize their equipment, but even from his distant vantage point, he could see the problem they faced. The debris field was too dense and unpredictable for their standard rescue equipment to navigate safely. The floating obstacles changed direction without warning, creating collision patterns that no computer could predict far enough in advance to plan a safe route. Without hesitation, Minho left his dormitory and headed for the emergency command center. His human stride carried him through the corridors faster than the floating or gliding motions of other species, and he arrived at the command center just as Coach Velkin was reviewing holographic displays of the disaster area. The coach's armored form was bent over a tactical display, his natural warrior instincts engaged as he tried to find a solution to what appeared to be an impossible rescue scenario. Emergency personnel surrounded him, all speaking at once in various languages, as they tried to coordinate a response that could save the trapped students without risking additional lives. Coach Minho interrupted, his voice cutting through the babel of concerned voices. Valken's massive head turned sharply, his eyes reflecting the stress of command responsibility. "Student mean you should be in the dormitory's safe zones with the other. I can reach them," Minho said simply. The command center fell silent. Every being present turned to stare at the human, their expressions ranging from disbelief to horror at the suggestion. "Absolutely not," Coach Velkin replied firmly. "The debris field is completely unpredictable. It's far too dangerous, even for a Deathworld." "Especially for me," Minho corrected, his voice steady, despite the magnitude of what he was proposing. "Because I'm a Deathworlder. Because my people evolved in environments exactly like this one." Through the command center's observation windows, They could all see the situation in Section 7 continuing to deteriorate. A large piece of debris, part of what had once been a decorative pillar, struck the transparent aluminum barrier near the trapped students, creating spiderweb cracks that spread across the surface like frozen lightning. My world didn't just have dangerous weather and predators, Minho continued, his voice growing more confident as he explained. We had earthquakes that could topple mountains, avalanches of rock and ice, volcanic eruptions that filled the air with deadly projectiles. For millions of years, humans survived by learning to navigate through exactly this kind of three-dimensional chaos. He gestured toward the holographic display showing the debris field. This looks impossible to you because your species evolved in stable environments. But to human eyes, this is just another problem to solve. We can see the patterns in the chaos, predict the movements of multiple objects simultaneously, and calculate safe paths through what looks like random destruction. Coach Velkin studied the human's face, reading the determination there. Around them, emergency personnel continued their frantic preparations, but their equipment was designed for predictable rescue scenarios, not for navigating through a zero-gravity obstacle course that changed configuration every few seconds. You're talking about risking your life for students who were terrified of you just days ago, the coach pointed out. Minho nodded, his expression serious but resolute. Those students are my classmates. Fear doesn't change that. And right now, I'm the only one here whose evolution prepared them for this exact situation. Through the observation windows, another piece of debris struck the damaged barrier, widening the cracks. Time was running out, and everyone in the command center knew that conventional rescue methods would take too long to implement. The trapped students needed help now, before the barrier failed completely, or before the spinning debris found its mark. Coach Velkin made the decision that would later be studied in Academy crisis management courses for decades to come. Emergency authorization granted. But you follow my instructions exactly, and you maintain constant communication throughout the rescue operation. As Minho prepared to enter the most dangerous environment any Academy student had faced in the institution's history, he realized that this moment would define not just his own future, but the relationship between humans and the rest of the galactic community for generations to come.